In this lesson, you're going to learn all about workflows. Now, workflows in Sprout Studio are a really powerful tool that lets you kind of put your business on autopilot. A workflow is really simply a set of tasks or a set of steps that Sprout Studio can apply to a lead or apply to a shoot, or you can have it automatically applied to a lead or to a shoot. And it basically lets you do all these things and plan all of these things up front now so that you don't have to think about it as you're running your business and in the busyness of running your photography business. A workflow step follows a really simple paradigm. It basically says, when this, do this. Meaning, when a certain thing happens, do this other certain thing. So you have a trigger and you have an action. So when something happens, do this. Now, the trigger can also be relative. So you can say 5 days before the shoot date, remind me to do this thing. Or 3 days after the shoot date, send this email. Or as soon as this workflow is applied, remind me to do this other thing. So you can build it to be really complex and really robust, but it's very simple in concept to understand and to build. Now, before we go and start making a workflow in Sprout Studio, there are going to be a few things that you're going to want to do first. So if you haven't already, take a minute, do these things, set up some of these templates so that as you build out your workflow, it's ready to go and you can use it in a much more powerful way. And once you're ready, let's hop into Sprout and do that. In the top right corner of Sprout, I'm going to click Settings. And then we're going to click into the automation section on the left-hand side and then click into workflows. Now we have two sections here. We have the lead workflow templates and we have the shoot workflow templates. They're basically the same thing. The only difference is that one is used for leads in Sprout and the other is used for shoots in Sprout. For now, we're going to go ahead and make a sample lead workflow. So I'm going to click the new workflow button here. And we're going to give this a name. Now, the first thing that you're going to need to do here is to add a workflow step. And again, a workflow can have as many different steps as you'd like to have in your business and in your workflow. So we'll go ahead and add one here. And again, you can see it follows this paradigm, when this, then that. So the this step here is the trigger. So go ahead and click that. And this is now where you can say, what do you want to happen? What's the trigger for this step in the workflow? So for this, we might just say workflow is applied. So we'll click when the workflow is applied. Then we want to go ahead and make a task. And let's just make a really simple task called do this. And that's just really simple, something for you to do. And what you can do here, this when step, you can see it's also clickable. And you can say, well, I want this to be immediately upon the workflow being applied, or in relation to the workflow being applied. So maybe you want to say 5 days after, or a month after, or a week after, or an hour after. You can use that again to be as flexible as you need to be here in your workflow. For this, I'm just going to say immediately. So now you can read this step and it says immediately upon the workflow being applied, then add the task, do this for anyone to complete. So I'm going to add another step here and I'm going to say, also workflow applied. I'm going to have that be an email. And so I want to send it to the primary client from the primary assignee. And I'm just going to choose a sample email template that I have here. But now for this one, instead of it being immediately, I'm going to choose 5 days after. So there's a really simple workflow here. So immediately upon the workflow being applied, add a task. 5 days after the workflow is applied, send an email. So let's go ahead and save this. And we're going to make a new lead. I'm going to go back to dashboard. I'm going to click quick add here, and we're going to make a new lead that we can apply this to. And we'll make this a wedding shoot type, and we'll click add lead. Now, by default, the workflow is not applied to the lead here. And we'll walk through in a variation later on how to automatically apply a workflow to a lead. But you can manually apply this to any lead or to any shoot. You can do this by clicking the quick actions button up here in the top right. and then clicking apply workflow, and that's going to ask you which workflow. Of course, I only have one, so I would just choose that one. The other way to apply it is to click the tasks page on the left-hand side for this lead, to click the apply workflow button, and then choose the workflow here. Let's just do it from here since we're already here. So I'll click apply workflow, I'm going to choose it. And now what it's going to do is it's going to ask me which steps in this workflow do you want to apply to this lead. This is really useful because you can selectively apply a workflow to a lead. So if you're bringing over leads and shoots from another system, or if you want to start a lead or a shoot part way through a workflow, you can choose to only apply part of the workflow to that lead. So I'm going to go ahead and just click next. It's going to remind me here what's about to happen, and then I'll click apply workflow. And so now you can see that I've basically got this task that's going to be coming up due on November 18th, which is the day after this workflow was applied. And then I've got this email that's going to go out on November 23rd, which is 5 days after the workflow was applied. And if I also click the overview button here, you can see it here in the overview for this particular lead. So we've got do this, which is a task that's due today. And then we've got this email that I can see is going to be going out on Monday. Now, the nice thing about Sprout being an all-in-one system is that you're also going to see that on your dashboard. So as you build this out, as you add workflows and leads and shoots and apply these around, you can see exactly what's happening in your business and exactly what you have to do every single day right here. This is my global dashboard, and you can see I've only applied this obviously to one lead so far, but I've got that task right here and I've got that email right here. So we can see exactly what's happening in our business at any point in time. Now, that's how we would go and build a really simple workflow. Let's just go ahead and mark that off as done, and let's actually delete this email. And let's build a more complex workflow just so we can see what's really possible with a workflow. I'm going to go back into the settings here. I'm going to click into automation and then workflows, and I'm going to make another workflow that's perhaps a little bit more complex. But this time I'm going to make it as a shoot workflow. And the reason that I want to use it as a shoot workflow, or make it as a shoot workflow, is because I want to use the shoot date as one of the triggers within the workflow. So I want to say something like a week before the shoot date, send this email, or a week after the shoot date, send this questionnaire, so on and so forth. And it's more useful to do that in a shoot workflow because by the time the shoot date comes, a lead shouldn't be a lead anymore. It should be a shoot. So we're going to use a shoot workflow for that instead. And so there we have it. So I've built a much more complex and much more dynamic workflow here. And let's just kind of walk through it here so we can see what's happening. Immediately upon a workflow being applied, we're going to add a task called do this task. 1 week after a workflow is applied, we're going to send an email. 1 month before the shoot date, we're going to add a task. 1 week before the shoot date, we're going to send a questionnaire. 1 day before the shoot date, we're going to add a task, and 1 week after the shoot date, we're going to send an email. Now, keep in mind that any of these steps here in a workflow, you can simply drag and drop them if you need to move them around or change their order. And you can also delete them by clicking the delete button here, or add a new task below it or above it by clicking the plus button here. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you can build this, because you can imagine as you build more complex workflows, this list is going to get very long. Now, just really quickly, let's run through the triggers here. So for a shoot workflow, again, we have workflow is applied, we have the booking date as a trigger, we have the shoot date as a trigger, we have the status change as a trigger, or we have a new custom date. Now we're going to walk through a new custom date in a variation of this lesson, but those are the different options that you can use as a trigger in a shoot workflow. If we look at the action here, we can see the different actions that you can apply based on the trigger is send an email, create a task, send a questionnaire, change the status, or apply another workflow. So you can see how flexible this can become by the time you combine a combination of triggers and actions, and then being able to add immediately upon or any relative amount of time before or after those triggers. It can be really, really complex and really, really robust, but yet it's still very simple to build and to make. So we've gone ahead and we've made this shoot workflow. I'm going to click save here, and we're going to go apply this to a shoot. Now let's go back into the dashboard and then open up the shoots section here. And let's open up this wedding right here. So again, we can apply this workflow in the same manner that we just talked about previously for the lead. I'm going to click quick apply up here, apply workflow. Now this will only show me my shoot workflows, so I can't see that lead workflow here anymore. So if you're not sure where something is, it might be because you've made it as a lead workflow or a shoot workflow and you're trying to apply it to the wrong thing. So we're going to go ahead and click apply this. We want to apply everything. Of course, again, if I didn't want to apply certain things, I could just uncheck it and those wouldn't be applied, but I do want to apply everything here. Going to click next. This is just to confirm what's happening, and I'm going to go ahead and click apply workflow. And now you can see here, everything has been added, all my tasks, my emails, my questionnaires, I can see exactly what's happening here. And if I click the tasks button on the left-hand side, you can kind of see everything is sort of grouped together here. So I've got shoot date here, and I've got these things that are all in relation to the shoot date. That email is going to go out in relation to it. I've got this task sitting here. I've got this email sitting here, and everything is now here and organized and kept, nice and clean for me in one place. So I've just done all this work up front. I've made this workflow. I've done it once, and now I can apply it to my leads and to my shoots and have all these things happen automatically in my business. And so that's how you put your business on autopilot using workflows in Sprout Studio. One thing that you might want to set up in Sprout Studio is to have Sprout automatically apply a workflow to a lead or to a shoot based on a number of things. You can set it up to apply automatically a couple of different ways. Let's go into the settings section here, open up automation, and then go back into the workflow section. If you'd like to automatically have a lead workflow apply to new leads that come into Sprout, you're going to want to focus on this default workflows section here. We're going to click new default workflow, and we're going to choose which workflow we want to automatically apply. And we're going to say that we want it to apply automatically for certain types of leads. So I can now have this workflow called My First Workflow automatically apply to new wedding leads. And then of course I could do a different one for different kinds of leads, and you can have different workflows for different kinds of leads that way. So now when I go to make, if I go back into dashboard, and if I go to make a new lead, and if I set the shoot type to be wedding, now when I go to add the lead, in that wedding lead, that workflow will be automatically applied. And you can see it was automatically applied because there's that task and there's that email. So that's how you can automatically have a lead workflow applied to a lead. If you'd like to have shoot workflows automatically applied to your shoots, there's a couple of ways that you can do it. If I go back into settings here, into automation, and into workflows, you can see, and if you remember, there is the option to apply a shoot workflow in a lead workflow. So I can say immediately upon the lead becoming a shoot, that's when it converts from a lead to a shoot, then I want to go ahead and apply a shoot workflow. And go ahead and click save. So now any leads that I apply this lead workflow to, when the lead becomes a shoot, it's going to apply this shoot workflow. So I can have that sort of inception happening where it's going to automatically apply a shoot workflow once a lead books into a shoot. So that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is if I were to go back into a lead, When I'm building the booking proposal for my client, which is the tool that's going to convert them from a lead into a shoot, let's click into that here. You're going to notice this little section down here called Apply Shoot Workflow. And I can choose, as you would guess, any shoot workflow from here. So what this will do is once the client has filled out this booking proposal, once they've converted into a shoot, Sprout will automatically apply this shoot workflow to that new shoot once they've converted. So those are a couple different ways that you can automatically have Sprout apply either a lead workflow to a lead or a shoot workflow to a shoot. One of the ways that you might want to use workflows in Sprout Studio is to have tasks or questionnaires or emails or anything else that are going to sort of surround a date that you have in a shoot. So let's say, for example, you have a wedding couple that has booked you as their wedding photographer, and you have their main shoot date, which would be their wedding date, obviously, and you can have a whole bunch of tasks that are in relation before and both after that shoot date. But let's say that you also want to have an engagement session added as a date in that wedding shoot. Well, you may want to have a whole bunch of other tasks and emails and questionnaires that go out in relation to that other date. You may want to have it that's different than the main ones that you would have for the wedding shoot date, for example. Or maybe let's use another example. If you're a portrait photographer and you want to have a whole bunch of emails and tasks that go out in relation to the portrait session itself, which is the shoot date, but maybe you also schedule the IPS session or a design consultation or a wardrobe review, whatever you have. Maybe you have another date that you add to that shoot that isn't the shoot date, it's just another date. But maybe you want some automation happening around that. You want to have some reminders, some follow-ups, some expectations, some questionnaires, some to-dos, some emails. You want to have those things go in relation to the other date that's not the shoot date. Sprout Studio Workflows gives you that flexibility to build tasks and questionnaires and emails around dates that are not the main shoot date. Let's walk through how to do that right now. We're going to go up into Settings again, and we're going to click Automation and then Workflows. Now let's do this for a shoot workflow, and we're going to kind of use the engagement session example for this particular demo here. Let's click New Shoot Workflow. So we're going to call this My First Date Workflow. Now you can create normal workflow items. Let's say immediately upon workflow being applied, we're going to create a task. Now we can say, let's say 1 week before the shoot date, let's send an email. So this is nothing new yet. This is all the exact same as how you're familiar to it working. Let's go relative 1 week after the shoot date. Then let's create a task. Now let's build something that would be relative to not the shoot date. So if I say, let's say 1 week before, but now instead of saying shoot date, I'm going to click this option here called New Custom Date. And this is now where I can tell the Sprout workflow, hey, let's go ahead and make this new kind of imaginary virtual date. And let's just call it engagement session. So you can see here, this popped in the bottom here. It says, hey, when you apply this workflow, you're going to be asked to define what is this imaginary virtual date that you're kind of using as this placeholder in the workflow. So just keep that in mind for just a moment. Let's go ahead and say we want to add a task. Now you're going to see if I add another, let's go 1 week after. Now when I click this, I have that custom date that's giving me an option. So I can say engagement session. And let's do this email number 2. Okay, so again, we have immediately upon workflow applied, do this task. 1 week before the shoot date, send this email. 1 week after the shoot date, add this task. 1 week before this virtual imaginary date called engagement session, do this task. And 1 week after that same imaginary engagement session, send this email. So let's go ahead and click save on that. And then let's go into a shoot that we already have. Now we're going to go ahead and apply that workflow. So we're going to click the quick actions button, click apply workflow, and we're going to apply that first date workflow. Let's click that. Again, it's going to ask you to confirm what you want to apply or what you don't want to apply. We're going to leave them all checked for now. Now this is where it's going to ask me, hey, you've defined this thing called engagement session in the workflow. I don't know what that engagement session thing is. So what do you want to map it to? How do you want to assign this? So if you already had that date added into this shoot, you could go ahead and just choose that date here. Or you can leave it as to be determined, meaning it's going to be this, again, imaginary virtual date in this shoot that is yet to be determined, and you can come back in and set that date later. You can apply an invitation to it, or you can set it up once you know what that date is. Or you can go ahead and actually choose the date now and pick the date and pick the time right now as you apply it. Let's leave it as to be determined for now, because most of the time that's probably what it's going to be, is when you're applying this workflow, or if the workflow is applied automatically, you may not know what that date is or when that date is supposed to be happening. So we're going to leave it as to be determined. We're going to click next step, and now we're going to go ahead and apply the workflow. So now that the workflow is applied, if I go into the tasks section here, you're going to see a couple of different groupings. Here's the shoot date, and you can see these tasks and these emails that are relative to the shoot date. But we have this engagement session down here, and you can see this is the task that's to be done before the engagement session. And you have this email that's going to go out the week after the engagement session, but we don't know when that is yet. So this is still sort of set as this imaginary date and time. We don't know when this is happening because the engagement session hasn't been set yet. However, when you go into the dates section here, and as soon as you have that date set, here's the engagement session. As soon as you have that set, so if I go in here now and I change the date to be not TBD, and I change it maybe to be in December, let's go ahead and click update. Now when we go into the tasks section here, you're going to see that due date for this task and this email have now moved, and they're all in relation to this new date that you've set called engagement session. And so that's how you can build these much more complex and robust and flexible workflows with these sort of imaginary floating dates that will move, and you can have things move with them. And so that's how you use custom dates and workflows in Sprout Studio.